Alrighty, hey, take your Bible. We're in Acts chapter 20-something. Acts chapter 20-something. I think it's 23, isn't it? Yeah, 23. Chapter 23 of Acts, verse number 12. Are you ready to roll? I think we're going to be able to cover some ground tonight. I think we're going to be able to make it and get done with the book of Acts in the next couple of weeks. Here we are with the Apostle Paul. He has been arrested. He has gone before the head Roman official in Jerusalem, the tribune, and he has basically made his case. He has not been let free, but he has not been killed by the Jewish religious leaders. But they're pretty upset with him because when we left last week, he had been dragged before the Sanhedrin. You might remember the tribune called the Sanhedrin together and basically wanted them to deal with the Apostle Paul and find out what they had against him so that he could make some judgment as the Roman official. And Paul made his defense, and in his defense, Paul clearly got them riled up, got them stirred up. And so they're more agitated at Paul than ever before, to the point that the Roman official had to pull Paul out of that environment lest things get out of control and he be killed. So chapter 23 of Acts, verse 12. When it was day, the very next day after this set of events of the Sanhedrin meeting, when it was day, the Jews made a plot. These would have been Jews that were a part of the Sanhedrin. They made a plot, and they bound themselves by an oath, neither to eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. How mad were they? They were mad enough not to eat or drink. This is the equivalent of a young child stomping their foot and going, well, fine, I'll just go to my room and die. That's one of our daughters used to do that when she would get upset. Well, this phrase, by an oath, that is listed in verse 12 is a very strong word in the Greek language. It is the equivalent of saying, may I be cursed if something doesn't happen. May God curse me if something doesn't happen. So this is a big deal. This is a big deal. Usually when this kind of an oath was made, a proclamation was made, it was meant to be kept. It was that serious of a pledge, of a promise that you make. It could be broken if circumstances prevented the fulfillment of whatever you sought to do, whatever you pledged to do. So in this case, they had pledged not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. They're not going to be able to get to Paul because he's going to be outside of their reach in the custody of the Roman officials. And so that's how they were probably able to break their oath. Basically, we gave it our old college try, but it was beyond our reach to get a hold of him. But they're pretty ticked off at him. Verse 13, there were more than 40 who made this conspiracy that came together and made this pledge. And it was a conspiracy to lynch Paul, to kill him without justice. Verse 14, they went to the chief priest and the elders and said, we have strictly bound ourselves by an oath to taste no food till we have killed Paul. Now, these individuals that they went to, the chief priest and the elders, these would have been individuals in the lineage of the Sadducees, or the sect of the Sadducees. Remember, there's Pharisees and there's Sadducees. The Pharisees dealt more with the letter of the law and the teaching of the law and the keeping, basically the academic side of it, whereas the Sadducees were more the practical side of serving in the temple. They were the frontline service people. The Pharisees tended to be the more behind the scenes academic people or head knowledge people. We could liken them in our day to maybe white collar and blue collar workers. But the Sadducees would have been sympathetic to this cause because what was the Jews' chief offense? Their chief offense is that Paul claimed that through Jesus we could obtain the resurrection of the dead. And so they went to people that were sympathetic to them to get them on their side. Verse 15. Now therefore you, along with the council, you religious leaders, along with the Sanhedrin, give notice to the tribune to bring Paul down to you as though you were going to determine his case more exactly. Send word up for the Roman leader to send Paul back down so that y'all can basically question him again and do this whole fiasco again And it's not going to have to, you don't have to worry about it happening, because it says here, and we are ready to kill him before he comes near. So they're going to lay in lurch. They're going to be hiding in the shadows between where Paul would be let out of his custody care and brought down to where the Sanhedrin would have met. And somewhere along that way, they were going to overpower the Roman guards, and they were going to kill Paul. And that was just good old-fashioned Western lynch mob justice. That's what that is. Verse 16. Now the son of Paul's sister heard of their ambush. And there's very little we know about Paul's extended family from the Scriptures. But here's a reference. It's the only reference here in the book of Acts to Paul's sister. It's possible, we don't know for sure because we don't have information to back it up. It's possible that Paul's sister lived in Jerusalem. It's possible that Paul himself grew up in Jerusalem, even though he was born in Tarsus. But we do know that he had at least come down to Jerusalem to be educated by Gamaliel. And it's also possible that if Paul's sister is not living in Jerusalem, if she's still back up in Tarsus, that she has sent her son, Paul's nephew, to Jerusalem to be taught by some rabbi the ways of their faith. So somehow or another, he overhears what they're going to do to Paul. Was he in the room where it happened? We don't know. Was his rabbi that he was learning from part of the lynch mob? We don't know. All we know is that he became privy to the knowledge. So he went, it says in verse 16, and he entered the barracks and told Paul. And Paul called one of the centurions. Remember, a centurion is someone who's over 100 men. So this is not just an average soldier. This would be like a lieutenant or a captain in our army. Paul called one of the centurions and said, this young man, notice he didn't say that's my nephew. He just said, this young man, take him to the tribune, for he has something to tell him. Verse 18. So he took him and he brought him to the tribune and said, Paul, the prisoner, called me and asked me to bring this young man to you, as he has something to say to you. Now, all of this at this point seems kind of weird to me, because, why would this Roman official, this basically captain of the guard, why would he feel the need to take a young boy to see his general? Why would he feel the need to do that? Was it the leading of the Holy Spirit? Maybe. The Scripture doesn't say that, but there's something that opens the heart of the centurion to actually take this young man. Maybe the young man told the centurion what he heard. The Bible doesn't tell us. There's a lot that we could read between the lines. We need to be careful when we try to do that. Let's just take the text at what it says. This young man gets an audience with the head of the Roman government there in Jerusalem. And look what happens in verse 19. The tribune took him by the hand and, going aside, asked him privately, what is it that you have to tell me? When it says take him by the hand, that phrase, that word there for take, is the same word that would have been used when the crowd tried to take hold of the Apostle Paul. But here, by adding the word hand, we know that it's not an aggressive move, but it's a gentle move. It's a move of accommodation, bringing him close in, private conversation moment. And the young man said, the Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire something more closely about him. Verse 21, but do not be persuaded. Literal translation. Do not trust them. It's literal translation. For more than 40 of their men are lying in ambush for him, who have bound themselves by an oath, neither to eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for your consent. He said, man, they're serious. They're serious enough to give up food and drink. They're 100% focused. When we go into a time of fasting, the whole point of fasting is not to lose weight, but to remove distraction, to allow us to focus on prayer. That's why we call it prayer and fasting, or fasting and prayer. This is a very similar type deal. They're giving up food and drink. They're fasting from, in order to remove distraction to focus on their purpose, which is the death of Paul. This young man says, make no mistake, they're serious. And there's 40 of them. It's not just one or two. There's 40 of them, 40 plus. So it's a big deal. This must have gotten the tribune's attention because it says in verse 22, so the tribune dismissed the young man, charging him, tell no one that you have informed me of these things. Then he called 2 of the centurions and said, get ready 200 soldiers. So basically get all of the 100 men under your care, each of you, get 200 soldiers. And then in addition to that, you're supposed to have 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen to go as far as Caesarea, which today we call Caesarea by the sea. It's over on the Mediterranean Sea, at the 3rd hour of the night. 3rd hour of the night, so real early in the morning. You know, this is like dark a.m. And why so many people? A show of force. That's all it was. In case these 40 men got wind that Paul was going to be transported and relocated, 40 men would have cowered away from almost 500 men there in his company. To show you how serious the tribune was in this, these men that he's allocated here would have been half of the allocated Roman forces in Jerusalem. There would have been 1,000 Roman forces in Jerusalem. He takes half of his army to get Paul from point A to point B and do it in the middle of the night. Also provide mounts for Paul to ride. He's not going to be walking. We're going to make sure that he is able to move expeditiously and bring him safely to Felix, the governor. So that's this guy's boss. So the tribune would have been over Jerusalem. Felix is going to be over the whole, basically the whole country of Israel, the whole country of Israel. And he wrote a letter to Felix, and then we have recorded what he wrote. The letter is important because that lets us know that it's an actual legal transfer of custody of care. So in Roman care, if you were a prisoner and you were moved from location A to location B, it wasn't always a prison. Sometimes you could be held captive in a barrack, but when you were moved from one major location under somebody's care to another location under another official's care, there was a letter, a chain of command letter that followed you to validate that you are in fact being transferred legally, officially to that new location, and that now you're coming out from under their authority and custody and being placed under the care and custody of the new individual. So that's a key point for us historically there, that he wrote this letter. Here's what he says. Claudius Lysias, to his, and that's the tribune's name, by the way, Claudius Lysias. He would have gone by Lysias. Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency, the Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them when I came upon them with the soldiers and rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman citizen. So, I mean, the tribune here is taking a little bit of liberty. He's taking a little bit of liberty in his details, but he's overall getting it right. I mean, he's going to embellish a little bit because, he's writing to his boss. Verse 28. And desiring to know the charge for which they were accusing him, I brought him down to their council, and I found that he was being accused about questions of their law, basically their religious practices, but charged with nothing deserving death or imprisonment. I didn't find any reason for him to be killed or imprisoned. Then we should have, then why didn't you let him go? Because to let him go would have possibly caused an uprising by the Jews, the Jewish leaders. Verse 30. And when it was disclosed to me that there would be a plot against the man, I sent him to you at once, ordering his accusers also to state before you what they have against him. I love this. He's making a reference here in his letter to what will be told to those religious leaders. This was an ex post facto statement on his part. He had, obviously, if Paul is leaving the city at the 3rd hour of the night, the leader has not gone to speak to the religious leaders. The tribune has not done that. He'll do that in the morning after Paul's had a good lead to get away from town. But he's writing here because by the time the letter gets there, they would have received the information. I love what he does here. It's pretty neat. Not only does he spare Paul's life that was at risk of this mob justice, but he now has placed all of this problem on somebody else. This is classic leadership, right? Classic military leadership. No longer my problem, now it's your problem. And oh, by the way, I'm not only sending you the guy that's the center of the problem, I'm going to tell those that have the problem with him that they got to come see you with their case. Good luck, kind of deal. All right. What do we call that? We call that passing the buck. That's right. Verse 31. So the soldiers, according to their instructions, took Paul, and they brought him by night to Antipatris. Thank you. Antipatris was a military station along the way built by Herod the Great, not a city, but more of a fortified structure. Verse 32, and on the next day they returned to the barracks, letting the horsemen go on with him. So they get a portion of the way out, this barricaded area. They stop. Half of them go back. Half of them go the rest of the way. All right. Verse 33, when they had come to Caesarea by the sea and delivered the letter to the governor, they presented Paul also before him. Now, on reading the letter, he asked what province Paul was from. And when he learned that he was from Cilicia, that's his hometown region. That's a region where Tarsus was, up there in modern-day Turkey. He said, I will give you a hearing when your accusers arrive. So this guy validates that he's a Roman citizen, and he says, all right, I'm going to put you over here. You're in my custody. When your accusers arrive, we'll have a hearing. And he commanded him to be guarded in Herod's praetorium. If you ever go to the Holy Land with me, we'll go to Caesarea by the sea. They have a beautiful, beautiful amphitheater there, but we'll actually take you to the ruins of this praetorium of Herod the Great. Pretty neat set of ruins that he'd actually made an indoor, for lack of a better term, an indoor swimming pool or wading pool that was filled with seawater. Seawater came in to the wading pool, but it was all covered when it was originally built. Pretty neat place. Verse 1 of chapter 24. Now after 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down with the elders and a spokesman, one Tertullius. Think of him as an attorney, a prosecuting attorney. And they laid before the governor their case against Paul. And when he had been summoned, Tertullius began to accuse him, saying, since through you we enjoy much peace. Listen to this guy, man. He is such a brown noser. He is brown noser. Listen to this. Since through you we enjoy much peace, and since by your foresight, most excellent Felix, reforms are being made for this nation in every way and everywhere, we accept this with all gratitude. Oh, Felix, you are the man. Man, we love everything you've done. Make Israel great again, man. You're the man right here. This is it right here. They're just pouring it on thick. Verse 4. But to detain you no further, I beg you in your kindness to hear us briefly. So he gets off the flattery and the fluff and he moves on. Verse 5. For we have found this man a plague. The word plague means pestilence. He is a pest in our flesh. He is a sore in our side. We can interpret that plague because pestilences and plagues were often associated with one another. One who stirs up riots. Stirs up riot. Felix could have cared less that Paul was a sore in their side. But when they said he stirs up riots, that's going to get his attention. Because any Roman government official at the city municipality level or the region level like Felix, their number one responsibility was to maintain Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Anything that threatened the peace of Rome, not the city, but the whole nation, stamp it out, snuff it out, kill it out. Because the country ruler, the emperor, the Pax Romana was the most important thing. Peaceful land, peaceful people, a peaceful reign. He stirs up riots. What's that, riots? Among all the Jews, he probably rolled his eyes at that, throughout the world, and is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. That basically means he's pointing to the Christian. So now this prosecuting attorney is saying not just this guy, but all the Christians all the followers of Christ are a problem. He even, verse 6, tried to profane the temple. Now, this is not going to be a big deal to Felix, that he was profaning the temple. But it was a big deal to them, and so they mention it. Probably going to be their downfall. But we seized him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to find out from him about everything of which we accuse him. The Jews also joined in the charge, affirming all these things that were said. So as Tertullius is finishing up, the Jews that were with him, those chief priests and religious leaders kind of chimed in. That's right, yeah, that's right. And so it's probably getting a little bit rowdy. Verse 10. And when the governor had nodded to him to speak, Paul replied, knowing that for many years you have been a judge over this nation, I cheerfully make my defense. You can verify that it is not more than 12 days since I went up to worship in Jerusalem. Felix, this is not an old problem. This is fresh. It was 12 days ago this happened, and all of a sudden I'm in front of you. That's a pretty huge statement. Normally it would have taken quite a long time to rise to the level of the governor of the region. It's only been 12 days. Verse 12, and they did not find me disputing with anyone or stirring up a crowd, either in the temple or in the synagogues in the city. Neither can they prove to you what they now bring up against me. It's all just hearsay, Felix. They haven't brought any proof. They're just talking out the sides of their mouth. Verse 14. But this I confess to you, that according to the way, that's an identification for the followers of Christ, which they call a sect. Paul takes deference here. He says, they're not a sect. I worship the God of our fathers, believing everything laid down by the law and written in the prophets, having a hope in God, which these men themselves accept. We believe basically the same things, that there will be a resurrection. Now these Sadducees would have got stirred up about that, of both the just and the unjust. So I always take pains to have a clear conscience toward both God and man. Verse 17. Now after several years I came to bring alms to my nation. I'd been gone for several years. I came back home. I went to the temple. I brought my alms and my prayers, he said, to my nation, and to present offerings. While I was doing this, verse 18, they found me purified in the temple. I had gone through the purification ceremonies that they hold to without any crowd or tumult. I wasn't in the middle of a crowd. I didn't have a huge following. They found me doing my singular thing by myself. But some Jews from Asia, oh, wait a minute now, not them, not these guys, but some Jews from Asia, I love this, a little side comment. They ought to be here before you and to make an accusation. This is a huge statement, by the way. I think everything Paul has said up to this point was leading to this one statement right here. This is the equivalent, what I'm about to tell you. Felix, none of them have any firsthand knowledge of what they're accusing me of. They're repeating what the Jews from Asia have told them I've done. Where are the witnesses? Where are the firsthand witnesses? Why are they not here? Could it be because they know that they don't have any leg to stand on? Felix would have picked up on that, and he does. Because not to have a clear firsthand witness is a major way to get your case dismissed. Should they not have anything against me? Verse 20, or else let these men themselves say what wrongdoing they found. Either get the firsthand witnesses here or get them to tell me what they saw firsthand when I stood before the council. Verse 21, Other than this one thing that I cried out while standing among them, quote, it is with respect to the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you this day. Felix, all they can bring before you firsthand is their beef with me that got stirred up when I was before the Sanhedrin, and it is this, that I believe in the resurrection of the dead, and these men do not. That is a theological issue, not a civil issue. Felix would not have dealt with religious, theological differences. He could have cared less. Verse 22. But Felix, having a rather accurate knowledge of the way, put them off, saying, when Lysias the tribune comes down, I will decide your case. Felix was actually married to a Jew, so he understood a lot more about the Jewish faith and practice than most other Roman governors. So he realizes the tension in the room. So instead of dismissing Paul at the fear and risk of the Jewish leaders getting in an uproar, getting riled up and causing an uproar, he basically says, look, I'm going to put a pause on this. We're going to have a stay, and we're going to revisit this when the local city magistrate, the tribune, comes. I'm going to summon him up here. And so that gives time for cooler heads to prevail. When Lysias the tribune comes down, I will decide your case. Then he gave orders to the centurion that he should be kept in custody but have some liberty, and that none of his friends should be prevented from attending his needs. Keep him restrained, but don't lock him up, don't shackle him, and if anybody wants to come and visit him, they can. This is about as minimal custody care as you're going to find in the Roman military. Probably was just staying in somebody's home. After some days, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, she was a Jew, and he sent for Paul, and he asked him to speak about faith in Christ Jesus. So Felix had heard these things. And as he reasoned about righteousness and self-control, Paul's talking to them about the gospel. And as a part of that, he talks to them about what the text here says, righteousness. Now, this is the best way to define this in the context of Paul's teaching is living a life that is worthy of God's standard, which we know no one can do. So it's possible, probably more like probable, that Paul was telling Felix some things that will later be recorded, if they hadn't already been written, in the letter to the Romans, which is that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. The wages of sin is death. No, not one is righteous. Those type things. So can anybody live up to the standard of God? No, we can be as good as we can be, but our very best is still not good enough for God. And then also executing self-control. That word self-control, it means self-control, but it's also a word that can apply to abstinence, specifically sexual abstinence. Some scholars believe that Paul is making a little bit of a strategic dig here because Felix, he didn't steal his wife Drusilla away from her former husband, but he did. You'd have to go back and look at the history of it. She was given at 14 years of age as a bride to another country's ruler, and Felix fell in love with her and ended up enticing her to leave that guy, and once left, he took her as his wife at the age of 16. So it's possible, we don't know for sure, but could they have had some kind of premarital encounter before their official marriage? It's possible. If so, then Paul might be making a dig here. Have you, in essence, saying, you know your life better than anybody else. Are your actions worthy of the standard of God's holiness? Have you lived your life in a way that has not morally betrayed the whatever? And so he apparently it gets Felix's attention. Look at this. And talks about the coming judge. Felix was alarmed and said, go away from my presence. When I get an opportunity, I will summon you. So Paul, in the sharing of the gospel, Felix just shuts down. Felix may, that word alarmed is an interesting word. Felix may have come under conviction to the gospel. But if he did, he didn't surrender over to it. So Paul is taken from his presence. Verse 26. At the same time, he hoped that money would be given to him by Paul. Felix wanted to pad his pocket like most Roman governors. So he sent for him often, conversed with him, probably always hoping to get a little pocket padding. Verse 27, when 2 years had elapsed, Felix was summoned by Porcius Festus, and desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. 2 years, this cat and mouse game is going on. For 2 years. Remember that. Chapter 25, verse 1. Hang with me, and we'll go just a few more verses. Now, 3 days after Festus had arrived in the province, not Felix, Festus, new leader in town, new sheriff in town. Now, 3 days after Festus had arrived in the province, he went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. And the chief, 2 years. Now, Paul's been in the custody of Felix for 2 years. Festus takes over the rule, and he goes into Jerusalem, and the chief priests and the principal men of the Jews laid out their case against Paul. Man, I hope they've been eating and drinking that whole time, because if not, they were real skinny. But they still have it in for Paul. If they had that much animosity and hate toward Paul, we can only assume that it transferred over to other Christians in the region. And they ask a favor against, it says, asking as a favor, they urged him, let me get my eyes right here. They made their case and they urged him, asking as a favor against Paul that he summon him to Jerusalem, because they were planning to ambush or kill him on the way. Festus, if you'll just bring him here, we can all talk about it, but they were going to kill him on the way. Festus replied that Paul was being kept at Caesarea and that he himself intended to go there shortly. So he said, let the men of authority among you go down with me, and if there be anything wrong about the man, let them bring charges against him. Now, after he stayed among them not more than 8 or 10 days, he went down to Caesarea, and the next day he took his seat on the tribunal, and he ordered Paul to be brought. And when he had arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him. So this is trial 2.0, bringing many and serious charges against Paul that they could not prove. Again, they didn't bring firsthand witnesses, and they still can't prove their charges. And Paul argued in his defense, neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I committed any offense. But Festus, your previous ruler here, your predecessor, wishing to do the Jews a favor, said to Paul, this is Festus, not Felix, but Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, said to Paul, do you wish to go to Jerusalem and there be tried on these charges before me? Paul, do you want to go back to Jerusalem and we'll have this trial there in the city where all this dust-up occurred? But Paul knew that was not a good idea. But Paul said, I am standing before Caesar's tribunal. You represent Caesar, and I'm standing before you where I ought to be tried, not by them. To the Jews I have done no wrong. As to yourself, know very well. If then I am a wrongdoer and have committed anything for which I deserve to die, I do not seek to escape death. If I've done something wrong, you get it proved, and I'll live by your standing. If I deserve to die, if you think I deserve to die, then let me die. But if there is nothing in their charge against me, no one can give me up to them. And then he says this, I appeal to Caesar. Every Roman citizen had this in their arsenal. This was like saying, I want to go to the Supreme Court. Then Festus, when he had conferred with his council, answered, to Caesar you have appealed, and to Caesar you shall go. Like the tribune in Jerusalem, he's been given an opportunity to pass the buck forward, all the way to Rome. And as the Spirit had told Paul that he would one day make it there, it seems that his destiny is now set for the city, the capital of the empire. And there is where we'll pick up next week. Let's pray together.